Most people think divorce is caused by cheating, poor communication, or falling out of love, but the data shows that the primary predictor of marital collapse isn't what happens in the bedroom, it's what happens in the bank account. There is a specific, measurable money threshold that acts as a silent ticking time bomb in your relationship. If your combined household income falls below a certain line, or if your debt-to-income ratio crosses a specific threshold, the statistical probability of your marriage ending within 5 years jumps by nearly 40%. We aren't talking about being poor. We are talking about the psychological load of financial friction. In 2012, researchers at Brigham Young University analyzed data from over 1,700 married couples. They found that couples who reported no money problems were significantly happier than those who reported even one minor financial disagreement. That seems obvious, but here's the kicker. It wasn't the total amount of money they had. It was the level of financial anxiety triggered by perceived scarcity. The threshold is not a dollar amount, it is a communication threshold. If you are earning $150,000 a year, but you are living in a city with a high cost of living where your expenses are $155,000, you are more likely to divorce than a couple making $40,000 with zero debt. It comes down to something called the financial stress index. When your expenses consistently exceed your income, or when you reach a debt load that exceeds your annual household income, you enter the danger zone. In this zone, your brain stops processing your partner as a teammate and starts processing them as a competitor for resources. Evolutionarily, this is a survival reflex. When resources are scarce, the brain prioritizes the self. It triggers a fight or flight response. When your partner asks to buy a coffee or gets a parking ticket or forgets to pay a bill, you aren't actually reacting to the $5 or the $50. You are reacting to the subconscious fear that your household is failing to thrive. Look at the numbers from the American Psychological Association. Money is cited as a top stressor for over 70% of married couples, but the divorce link happens when that stress moves from an external problem to an internal character flaw. The threshold is crossed the moment you stop saying, "How do we fix our budget?" and start saying, "Why are you so bad with money?" The moment you attribute financial difficulty to a partner's personality rather than a systemic budget issue, the marriage is mathematically on a countdown. Let's look at the debt threshold. A study published in the journal Family Relations found that credit card debt specifically is a high-octane fuel for divorce. It isn't the mortgage. It isn't even the student loans. It is consumer debt. Credit card debt is associated with a 25% increase in the likelihood of divorce. Why? Because mortgage debt is seen as an investment in a shared future. Consumer debt, clothes, dining out, gadgets, is seen as a consumption of the present at the expense of the future. It represents a misalignment of values. When one partner prioritizes present pleasure and the other prioritizes future security, the money threshold has been breached. There is a concept in behavioral economics called the financial infidelity threshold. This is when you start hiding purchases, lying about account balances, or secretively moving money. In a 2018 survey by the National Endowment for Financial Education, 40% of married adults admitted to financial infidelity. Of those, 75% said the behavior negatively impacted their marriage. If you are hiding a receipt, you have already crossed the line. The money isn't the problem. The loss of transparency is the problem. The threshold is hit when the us becomes me and you. Consider the 50% rule. When one partner controls more than 50% of the decision-making power regarding money, the disenfranchised partner begins to pull away emotionally. Financial autonomy is a primary driver of marital satisfaction. If your marriage has a chief financial officer and a subordinate, you are creating an environment of resentment. It doesn't matter if the CFO is better at math. It matters that the subordinate feels like a child. Resentment is the silent killer. It doesn't scream like anger. It grows in the dark. It eats away at intimacy. When a couple reaches a net worth of zero or sinks into the negative, they often stop planning for the future. They live in a state of permanent survival mode. The human prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for long-term planning and empathy, actually shrinks under chronic financial stress. You become more impulsive. You become less patient. You become less capable of navigating the complex emotional terrain of a long-term relationship. You are literally making yourself less capable of being a good partner because you are broke. So, what is the fix? How do you avoid the threshold? First, separate your identity from your income. If you view yourself as a failure because you have debt, you will project that failure onto your spouse. Second, initiate the monthly money summit. This isn't a bill-paying session. This is a strategic meeting. You look at the debt, you look at the goals, and you discuss the values. The threshold is breached when you don't talk about money until you are fighting about money. If you only discuss finances when a bill is late or an account is overdrawn, you have already lost. Third, implement a freedom fund. Even if it is only $50 a month, each person needs an amount of money that they can spend on anything without having to justify it to their spouse. This removes the parent-child dynamic and restores the partner-partner dynamic. The researchers at the University of Kansas found that couples who talk about their goals, not just their deficits, are 30% more resilient in the face of financial crises. Money is not just currency. It is a language of trust. It is a map of what you value. When you spend money, you are voting for what matters to you. If your votes and your spouse's votes are constantly clashing, you are building two different lives inside one house. Eventually, the house becomes too small for both visions. The money threshold is simply the point where the cost of maintaining the marriage exceeds the perceived value of the partnership. If you are currently at this threshold, you don't need a divorce lawyer. You need a financial therapist and a radical change in your communication cycle. You need to shift from you versus me to us versus the numbers. Ask yourself, are we fighting about the debt or are we using the debt as a weapon to fight each other? If it's the latter, the money is just the excuse. The real problem is a lack of a unified vision. The most stable, long-lasting marriages are not those with the highest bank accounts. They are those with the highest level of financial alignment. They agree on what to save for. They agree on what to sacrifice. They agree on what constitutes a disaster. If you don't have a plan, you have a plan to fail. Data doesn't lie. Divorce rates are highest among couples who struggle to manage the psychological weight of their financial choices. You can climb out of debt. You can fix a bad budget, but you cannot fix a marriage where the partners no longer trust each other's vision for the future. The money threshold is not a barrier that keeps you from happiness. It is a mirror that shows you the exact state of your commitment. If you are worried about the money, look at the marriage. If you are worried about the marriage, look at the money. They are the same thing. When you stop hiding, when you stop blaming, and when you start planning with the same intensity that you currently use for fighting, you move the threshold back. You regain control, but you have to move fast because every day spent in the danger zone is a day where the foundation of your relationship gets a little thinner, a little weaker, and a little more brittle. The money threshold is not a destination. It is a warning light on your dashboard. You can ignore it until the engine blows. Or you can pull over, look at the map, and decide on a new route. The choice isn't about your bank balance. It's about whether you want to be alone with your money or together with your partner. Which one are you choosing today?